So communism, why is it compelling to people? Why do they care? Why does it say, why does it speak to people so much? So when something is universal but anti-rational, like communism, you have to look at the emotional ties, the emotional roots that drive people towards it. Where does it come from? So if you look at the family, what is the family? Well, the family has authority figures known as the parents who provide resources based upon need. It's from each according to their ability, which is the parents going out and making money and running their dishwasher and all that kind of stuff. So it's from each according to their ability, to each according to their need. Well, that is a relationship between parents and children. Children look to the parent to provide them resources, and in return, the parent expects some sort of compliance and obedience from the child. If the child fails to provide that compliance or obedience, the child gets hit, or the child is locked in his room, or the child no food is given to the child, or the parents withdraw, or they're cold towards the child. In other words, the parents escalate threats until the child complies. Now, that's natural. That's healthy. That's why I'm not saying that the punishment and all of that, but that relationship from each according to their ability to each according to their need, that is a natural and healthy aspect of parenting. You don't sit there to your toddler and say, well, it's time to earn your keep, kid, right? I mean, you provide to your children because you are the elder and they are helpless and needy and dependent. And you do expect a certain amount of conformity, and of course, because I promote peaceful parenting, that conformity should be along the lines of reasoning with your child, of restraining your child where necessary, and not in yelling, hitting, beating, threatening, or anything like that. But if you have a traumatized childhood, see, trauma, what it does is it freezes people in time. It freezes people in time. So if you are 12 and you experience some horrible traumatic incident, perhaps you are beaten within an inch of your life, perhaps you are raped, or extremely neglected, then what happens is your emotional development tends to freeze at that particular time. You can't continue to grow. The same thing happens with addiction. So when people get addicted, they use their addiction as a way of avoiding their emotional state or their emotional trauma. And so what happens then is because they use their addiction as a way of self-medicating their way out of dealing with their emotional trauma, they cease to grow as human beings, which is why you do see a lot of people who are addicts in their 30s and 40s who are still trying to live lives of teenagers and early 20s because your emotional development stops with unprocessed trauma and with all of the mechanisms that you put in place to try to avoid all of that unprocessed trauma. Now, of course, it's beneficial for you to process the trauma, but it's not beneficial to the people who abused you. So if you were, say, raped by a parent, abused by a parent, let's say it was your father, then your father doesn't want you to process that trauma, because if you do process that trauma, let's say he raped you, well, then you might go to the cops and then he might go to jail where he might die. Yes, you know, pedophiles don't do that well in prison for reasons that are pretty obvious, that a lot of people in prison are there because they were raped as children and either did not or could not process the trauma. So it's to your benefit to process the trauma, but it's to your abuser's benefit that you don't, that you act out, right? Especially what happens is if you are an abuser, what you want to do is break the will of your victim. And so that you can call your victim a failure and then blame everything that goes bad in your victim's life on the victim, which keeps them distracted and self-obsessed and insecure to the point where they never really get round to circling back and confronting you for the abuse that you perpetrated upon them. So the whole point of childhood is it's a stage that's supposed to be outgrown, but the way that you outgrow childhood is you get your needs met, right? You get your needs met. Your needs are met when you're young, so you gain a secure bond, you get breastfed, you get cuddles, you get held, you get played with. People take delight in your existence. They enjoy your company. They look forward to seeing you. They hug you. And you grow up certain of your bond with your parents. You're not yelled at, you're not insulted, you're not hit, you're not thrown into some ghetto of a public school to wend your way among the Lord of the Flies, lowest common denominator sociopathy of your average brightly lit, well-painted classroom. You get your needs met. And when you get your needs met, you can move on to the next stage. If your needs are not met, then you get angry, you get hurt, you get frustrated, you get fearful. But you can't process that as a kid because you have to bond with your parents. All of the kids who openly challenged abusive or neglectful parents throughout most of human history were simply abandoned. They're just like, you're too much trouble. Or they weren't given enough food, or they weren't scooped up when the wolves came calling because they were snacky. So we're all ingrained to please our parents. We have to please our parents because our parents are the source of our food. You know, if you're trapped in some gulag or some prison, you have to have the guards like you. Because if the guards dislike you, they just might not bring you enough food. That might not kill you. They might just underfeed you. But if you get sick, you won't have enough strength to fight it. You have to, right? When people have authority and power over you, you have to find a way to please them if they're not affectionate towards you already. So you bond with your abusers. You internalize the abusers so that you don't trigger them, right? So I internalized my mother, who was a very volatile, dangerous, and violent woman. I internalized her so that my internal mom would stop me from doing stuff that would trigger my external mom, and that's the best way to survive. Then you kind of got to deal with that later, but, you kind of just suck it up and deal with the war that you're in as a child at the time. Now, you get stuck there. You get stuck there. So if you can't ever outgrow your childhood, you will forever be in search of an authority figure who provides for you and punishes you. Because the provision and the punishment for most families tend to go hand in hand. And generally, since I talked about IQ yesterday, the higher IQ families spank and punish less, and the lower IQ families spank and punish more. So most people's relationship to the state is very conditioned upon their relationship to their parents. Often their father, but can sometimes be their mother. Depends if they're a single mother, of course, and that generally is the case because she is both nurturer and disciplinarian, which is a complex role for any human being to fulfill. And we know in general that single moms are very bad at raising children, particularly boys. See, apparently no woman can think of being a scientist without lots of female mentors, but apparently boys can just learn how to be men without fathers. No problem. So if you have unmet needs from childhood, then you will always and forever be looking for a substitute family that is going to do the right thing, and then you'll never have to grow up, you'll never have to deal with the trauma, you'll never have to confront the people who harmed you, your parents, which we're strongly, strongly programmed to avoid doing. It's a very, very tough thing to do. To sit down as an adult and confront, or as a child, it's virtually impossible, but as an adult, it's very hard. Certainly one of the hardest things I ever did in my life was sit down and confront my mother about her abuse of me when I was a child. And it was 3 or so conversations and then one more after that sometime. And it's a very, very hard thing to do. It goes very much against the grain. It's a very difficult thing to do. But it's essential because that's how you grow up, is you live in truth, you live in reality. So communism is for people who haven't grown up. And this sounds like, just grow up. And no, I mean, I really sympathize with the trauma. When you think of people like the Antifa fellows, right? I mean, they've got weird piercings and sleeve tattoos and weird hair and, 1,000-yard stares and you name it, right? I mean, just think of what kind of childhoods those people have had, that they end up with such psychotic rage, such sociopathy, such an inability to connect with anyone real. And they think it's all about the state, but they're little kids, basically. They're like teenagers, early 20s. They haven't even remotely grown up to the point where they can look at the state as anything other than a substitute for parental figures. And this idea, they hate the state, they wish to destroy the state, they wish to kill the state. This matricide and fratricide writ large. They just want to kill their parents, and they're substituting the state because it's too emotionally traumatic for them to look at the anger that they have towards their parents. The parents who abandoned them, maybe, and a lot of them come from rich families, right? These Antifa guys, they come from rich families. So what's going on? Well, it's pretty clear. I had the, I suppose, honor of working in a daycare for years when I was in my teenage years. And I actually got out of school for half an hour early every day because I had to get on 2 buses to get to the daycare job that I had. And I worked there all summers, and I worked there for a couple of years. Had a great relationship with the kids. I loved them. They were very keen on me. And I remember when they finally got a hold of my phone number and they just called me day and night and all that. It was kind of sweet. But so in the daycare, though, it was pretty clear that it was tough on the kids, right? I mean, they wanted to be with their parents. They didn't want to be in some daycare for hours and hours, right? So for the rich kids, why do they hate capitalism? Because capitalism stole their parents, right? This is sort of primitive mechanism that's going on in their minds, right? Why would they hate capitalism so much? Well, of course, on their phones, lattes, Starbucks, blah, blah, blah. The cliches are pretty obvious and pretty predictable, right? So why would they hate their parents so much? Why would they hate capitalism so much? Because their parents dumped them in daycares and ignored them and put them in summer school so the parents could go and work. In other words, capitalism stole mommy, capitalism stole daddy. I hate capitalism. If I kill capitalism, then mommy and daddy won't have to go to work all the time, and kids won't have to suffer through what I suffered through. In other words, if you have trauma in your family history, it is almost impossible for you to see society as an adult. Everything becomes, it's about your family, it's about your history. And that's really important. And if you look at the sort of the little kid view of the family in sort of traditional family structures, right? The parents provide things and the kid doesn't really know or have any clue where the money comes from. They're just, stuff happens and there's money, right? And that's the communist or socialist relationship to the state. The government just has money and the government should just spend money. The government, mommy and daddy is supposed to provide me with health care. So when I'm an adult, given that the state is mommy and daddy, of course, it feels perfectly true that the state should provide you with health care. Mommy and daddy is supposed to provide me with education. So of course, I should get free student loans to go to college. Mommy and daddy expect compliance, and if I don't comply, I will get hit or I will get grounded. Well, that's police and prisons, right? You understand how this all just fits together, right? And people in the government instinctively recognize this. This is why they continually promote policies that traumatize children. Which is why, if we talk about these riots, where a lot of these kids are coming from. They're coming from these ghetto households where nobody may have seen a job application for 3 or 4 generations because of the welfare state. The welfare state pays a single mother the equivalent of $70,000 to $75,000 a year U.S. to have a couple kids. And what I mean by that is to earn the equivalent of the benefits that she gets. And the benefits are legion and widespread and multifaceted. It's called the welfare trap. I've got a whole video on it. You can look for it on my channel. Well, you probably can't find it, but find some way. Go outside of YouTube and look for it. But the welfare trap is how much money would the woman have to earn in order to match the benefits she's getting? Or another way of putting it is, how much does she have to make before the effective taxation rate is not 100%? And the reality is that if she's got 2 kids, she has to earn $70,000 to $75,000 just to match the benefits she gets. And the benefits are contingent upon there not being a man in the house, and not being a husband, not being a father in the household. Which is why in some of the Ebonics, the welfare, so the public housing, Section 8 housing is referred to as girlfriend farms. You can't move in, or if you can move in, you got to leave no trace and all that. Can't have a man around because you never know when the social worker's going to come by and blah, 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 right? So pay women who usually aren't super smart. Like the average kid in a middle-class household hears about 2,500 different words a day. The average kid in a welfare household hears about 600 words a day. They're not doing a lot of extra parenting when they're home at that particular time, that particular situation. Because the kids are a methodology for getting money. It's not that they take joy in their kids' presence. I mean, some do, of course. I'm very much generalizing here, but there's definitely a pattern there. So you set up the welfare state, which undermines and destroys the family. Kids grow up without fathers. And you then have these terrible government schools where the kids are taught very early about hypersexual topics, and you have 6, 7, 8-year-olds learning about creepy stuff like anal sex and all that, and just really gross stuff that stimulates our selected behavior, this rabbit rather than wolf behavior, and promiscuity then erupts among the girls who are looking for a father figure or finding some way to attach a man to them. And of course, when we grow up without fathers, our biology is programmed for an unstable universe. Because why are there no fathers? Well, because there's war, there's famine, there's plague, there's pestilence. The men are all hunting some dangerous animal that's taking them down on a regular basis. That's why there aren't fathers around. So in a reproductive situation, the reproductive strategy for an unstable situation socially is to have as many children as possible, pay very little attention to each one of them, and just see who grows up and makes it. That's called R-selected, right? There's a bunch of rabbits and toads and frogs and all of that. They all just have a whole bunch of kids, and good luck, kid. That's R-selected. And K-selected is the apex predators in general. They have fewer, the owls, the lions, the wolves, and so on. They have fewer kids, but they invest in their kids and they train their kids and so on. And just because they're more in control of their situation. Life is pretty chaotic for a mouse. It's not so chaotic for a wolf. It's more predictable, more controllable. So you put in all of this chaos. You put in all of this propaganda about how men are dangerous and women are victimized and all of that. And then you also pump up women's expectations to the point where they can't ever be satisfied with a man, because they're strong, powerful goddesses, and you hide from them the inevitable decline in egg quality. 90% of eggs are gone by the time a woman's 30, 98% by the time she's 40, and you just push off the wall, you push off the decay of her fertility and beauty to the point where she ends up having to scrabble around the crappy used car lot salesmen, men broken, divorced, destroyed by family courts in their 30s. You just end up with kids having pretty terrible childhoods. Neglected, abused, abandoned, betrayed, traumatized in school. Bad childhoods. So then you prevent the emotional development from happening for children, and then they grow up utterly dependent upon the fantasy of the state as the perfect parent. And the state will provide for you. And if you don't obey the state, you get thrown in prison, which is being sent to your room, or you get punished, which is violence from the cops. This is the reality of how these things come about. From each according to their ability, to each according to their need. That is the reality. So that's why I said communism is for people too traumatized to grow up. Let's be frank. I mean, these rioters have scared the hell out of the entire country. Like, the entire country is looking at this stuff in a vivid and powerful way that was not really possible in the past. They're looking at